Good evening, everyone. I'm David Johnson, Transform Ed Consulting, and we have as our guest this evening Scott D'Amico. Scott, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Now, you said you're traveling. Where are you?
Yeah, so right now I'm in beautiful Beeville, Texas. It's in
Beeville,
between
Texas?
San Antonio and Corpus Christi. We decided at the last minute last night, my wife and I, we were like, we should book a beach vacation. We haven't been to the beach at all. And then right after we booked it, we remembered we had all these things that were sort of on the agenda. So this is my first time getting familiar with Beeville. So shout out to the Beeville Public Library, who's open right now and letting me use their room. They're fantastic.
Great. And speaking of shout outs, let me give a shout out to my friend and colleague, Cassandra Williams. She's the brains behind Educational Innovation 360 Degrees. And she and I collaborate on our live chats. Again, I'm David Johnson from Transform Ed Consulting, and you can see the list of the services that we offer. So, Scott, let me read your bio in brief here. Scott D'Amico, Faculty Development Program Lead, Alamo Colleges District, San Antonio, Texas, is an educator with nearly 15 years experience in higher education. He has served in a wide range of roles, including academic advising, recruiting, program management, and teaching. Currently, he is Faculty Development Program Lead for the Alamo Colleges District, where he designs and facilitates innovative training focused on generative AI, active learning, and leadership development. A veteran of the U.S. Air Force and a passionate advocate for public education, Scott also teaches federal and Texas government courses at Northeast Lakeview College. Scott holds a master's degree in political science and public administration and undergraduate degrees in political science, journalism, and sports media, with additional graduate work in education and healthcare administration. You've done a lot of different things. What do you want to be when you grow up?
I just want to be employed. That's it.
So, well, how did you get to all of those different interests? Political science, journalism, sports media, and so on.
Yeah, it's funny. I sort of joke that the best thing that I ever did was get married and then have my wife sort of lead what I was going to do with my life. I jumped into the military after a couple of years of unsuccessful attempts at college. And then once I got out of the military, I married my wife, who was getting her PhD. And as she was finishing her PhD, I finished my bachelor's program, and she had a few more years on her PhD. And she said, she told me, hey, this is the time to get a master's degree. So being the good husband, I just listened and did as she told. I studied public administration and political science because I thought I'd be able to just sort of dovetail into wherever she was going to work into whenever she got hired as a professor. And I just sort of lucked out, and I was just hired at the same college that she was.
So what's the job you did in the Air Force?
I was a healthcare. I worked in healthcare administration. So essentially, my job in the Air Force was filing medical records, helping doctors create schedules for patients, doing a light medical coding. So sort of the admin work that you would see around a clinic. That's what I was doing in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask a little bit about your work as a faculty development program lead. So you've taught at Northeast Lakeview College, which is one of the 5 Alamo colleges within the Alamo Colleges District. And now you are in professional development. How did you get into professional development? And then did you also study andragogy and how adults learn?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. One of the things I sort of realized, especially after my first conference, going to the first conference I went to about professional development, is you sort of learn that we all kind of have similar stories where somebody is teaching in some discipline, right? And it seems like there's a need for faculty development somewhere, right? So someone fills that from within the institution itself. My tracking is a little strange, right? So my first job in higher ed was with an institution called Whitworth University. It's a small private liberal arts college. And there I got the chance to have a lot of different hats. I did some program management. I did some admissions. I did some advising, and I did professional development for some of the faculty that we had. It was a graduate program in teaching, and we would have quite a few adjuncts that would come in that we need to learn how to use our systems and how to work with our students. I would help out with some of that. And then when we ended up moving to San Antonio, there was a position open at the Alamo colleges. I had taught previously, and I had done some faculty development work, and I was hired to be a faculty fellow for faculty development at the Alamo colleges. And it was actually at Northwest Vista College. And so I was tasked with being sort of a bridge or a liaison between the district and the colleges to try to help disseminate.
Is that because you had some expertise in technology?
Correct. Yeah. So I had taught for a while at Whitworth. I developed expertise in teaching with technology, different technical programs. And so I was brought in there. And I'd also taught too a little bit. I had taught some humanities courses and, of course, political science.
Now, we better keep moving because I can take you down a road regarding andragogy and pedagogy and teaching experience. I can take you down that road. So let's talk about our topic for today. And I like the way you did this, rank. but you spent 4 years in the military. So how is it that you still think in a military mind?
I didn't advance very far in my rank. I moved up to senior airman, and that was about it. So I was thinking the whole time, how do I move up faster? And it never really happened for me.
Oh, well, we call you senile airman. but go ahead. How did you wind up with rank? Did you think that up, or was that what you had in mind and it just fit?
No, it's a great question. Well, it sort of just fits. But one of the things I did when I was first hired in faculty development, one of the first things that you're charged with is create a session for faculty members that they would be interested in and that would be useful for them, right? So that was the first session that I created, was a session specifically on working with military connected students. So yes, it sort of helps out, like for the format for this, that rank kind of appears. But this really sort of follows the format of the way I created those sessions for our faculty members so they could have a better understanding of specifically how to work with military connected students.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Scott, I'm going to get all over you, buddy. I'm going to get all over you.
Just like my first sergeant. Get on me.
because I'm really thinking hard about the differences in the pedagogy that one would bring to teaching military students. So, sir, we have 4 topics today. R, recognize the transition. A, appreciate their strengths. N, navigate with empathy. K, know your role. So where would you like to start, sir?
Well, let's start with the R.
Okay.
Let's start with that.
Recognize the transition. When you say transition, do you mean, which transition do you mean?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there's a whole variety of transitions that are taking place simultaneously. And one of the things that if you sort of look at the academic literature, when it deals with the way people respond to sort of large scale changes that happen at once, right? You see a lot of work on transitions theory, this idea that one person might be experiencing a variety of transitions simultaneously. So like if we were to think about a student who spent, say, 4 years in the military, right, did one enlistment and then they're getting out, when they come back, they're going to experience a lot of things. And that's irregardless of whether or not they're in college, right? Like I know when I was in the military, I didn't have to think a lot about where I was going to stay, if I was going to pay for rent. I didn't have to think a lot about how I was going to procure food, right? Because I had a chow hall that I could go to. I didn't really have to think much about, from an occupational standpoint, everything that I needed to know was told to me, right? I didn't have to think for myself a lot, which made things a little easier. And also too, right? Like you have relationships that you've built with people that are fundamentally different over time. Like you've been somewhere for 4 years. In my case, it was Biloxi, Mississippi, which is about 8 hours away from Oklahoma. And when you return back to that place you were at, those relationships are not the same, right? You're not the same person you were 4 years ago.
Are you saying they're different because you are different or because you're just grown apart?
I think it's just the very nature of the way life works, right? Like we are all constantly changing. We're all evolving as people. And you're evolving, they're evolving, and the relationships are just at different points. And so like there's a little bit of a transition and sort of reestablishing those, for a lack of a better term, right? Friends, family, everybody that you're around, and all of these things are happening like simultaneously, right? It's not as if like these things are happening one at a time. And then if you add the fact that you're going to college on top of it, it's a completely different transition, right? When I transitioned from being a high school student to being a college student, that did not go well for me, right?
It sounds like you're implying what I experienced, and I called it culture shock.
Sure.
I grew up in, well, we can go down that road, but eventually I wound up in college, and it was culture shock. And once I got acclimated to college and went back home, it was culture shock again. And eventually I learned how to adjust quickly. What do we call it? We call like code switching. So I learned how to code switch a lot faster so I would not have a culture shock each time I change places. So is that what you're speaking about when you say transitions?
Yeah, there's a part of that too. Like culture plays a part in it, right? Like if you think about too, like if you're going from college, like if you're thinking about the college environment versus the military environment, I don't know, David, like were there a lot of times when you were in the military where people said, we really want to know what you think and tell us if you think we're wrong about something?
When you were speaking about your wife, and you asked your wife, or your wife told you what to do or something like that, I would have said, I salute smartly and say, yes, ma'am. So yeah, so that answers your question. Salute smartly and say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think you have a similar marriage that I do. Like the military experience is a lot like marriage to a certain degree. But yeah, I mean, that's part of it too, right? Like, I mean, like the ability to speak freely and to question people in authority, right? That's something that I expect in my classroom. I want students to tell me if they think I'm wrong about something, and I want them to be open about those things. But obviously, if you're coming from the military, right, you're going to be less apt to sort of jump in and question your professors right away.
So when you say recognize the transition, you're speaking to those who teach former military students or military connected students.
Correct.
So what is it you tell them? What is the pedagogy? What is the approach or methodology that they should use to understand and work successfully with transitioning students, military transitioning students?
Well, I always tell, like, whenever I'm in sessions with faculty members, I tell them the same thing, right? Like that some of the best practices for working with military connected students, they're not really all that different from working with any of our students. So like, for instance, when we talk about sort of understanding the transitions, I think a lot of it is just being open to the idea that your military students are encountering something different than some of your other students might be, right? Being open to the fact that those military students, they might have appointments at the VA that they've booked 2 to 3 months in advance, that if they rebook, they'll have to wait 2 to 3 months later to get another appointment. Sometimes just kind of like little things that revolve around sort of being caring and being understanding. And some of those things are things that happen right off the bat. Like one of the things that we talk about, and I don't know if you've done this in your class or not, but in your syllabus, you can say, hey, if you feel comfortable disclosing your veteran status, I would love to know.
So is that something you would recommend people include in their syllabi?
I would, yeah. Like I would definitely recommend that. I wouldn't force anyone to disclose their veteran status or their military status. And that's another thing people should probably know. And David, it's probably something that you've encountered. I mean, there are some veterans who are incredibly excited that they served in the military and they're incredibly prideful about it. There are some people who are not as excited about their military experience, or they didn't have the same type of military experience that somebody else did. And that's another
another aspect of this is non-traditional student. Well, we're at community colleges, and we should expect that we would have non-traditional students. I had a woman in my class who was retired from working at Burger King, and it was finally her time to attend college. And her boys were grown, or had already graduated from college themselves. So non-traditional non-traditional students, I think, is part of what community college is all about. So with military or former military connected students, non-traditional students, are there specific approaches one should use with non-traditional students in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think there are some approaches that work typically better, right? I think especially with our older students, who are non-traditional, we can do a good job of leveraging the skills that they already come with, right? Like with military students specifically, we know that they do things like they understand teamwork really well. We know that they have a pretty good sense of what it takes to sort of follow through with getting things done. We know typically that those students do well with things like checklists and rubrics, right? And again, like those are things that are helpful not only to military students, but they're also things that help with non-traditional students too, right? Who have spent some time in the workforce, who are now coming into college. So again, there are small changes, right, that work particularly well for veterans that we see in the research. But when we dig into it, we see it's also helpful for other students. Chunking, right, is also a thing that is very good for military students. Specifically, military students who might have had some sort of TBI, some sort of traumatic brain injury, which happens quite a bit during military service, or even with PTSD. Those types of exercises can help quite a bit.
Okay. Well, I'm watching the clock. We better move on. We have 3 other bullets we need to address. Appreciate their strengths.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was kind of sort of dovetailing into, right? This idea that they already come equipped with a variety of experiences that separate them from some of the traditional students and even some of the non-traditional students that we might have. So, like for instance, David, I'm assuming that by the time did you finish your military? You were completing your degree as you were retiring from the military.
I did a lot of stuff. I wound up with 4 different degrees. And the military paid for, 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. And in part, the military paid for those.
They should have paid for more. But when you think about being in the classroom, right? When you think about some of the other students you're around, I'm assuming that you might have probably had more experience in traveling and dealing with other people than some of the other traditional students that you might have been around. And I know that's the case for me in my classes with a lot of my military students. I noticed that they have experiences in different places that some students don't have. They have experiences talking to different people. They have good experience. They have a good understanding of how to take direction. They typically have a good understanding of how to organize groups and disseminate tasks. They work really well too, oftentimes paired with other students. So they do a good job of helping other students catch up. So veterans, I think, have a ton of like useful skills that oftentimes I think faculty members don't really know or think about in terms of leveraging. And I think
so both you and I were in the Air Force, and now I got to remember all these things. I know this is a community college in the Air Force, and what are the terms? You can get credit for work experience, and there are different terms, and I'm not getting them right now.
Yeah, it's like life experience, work experience. And
then, of course, we had to do our CDCs when we were enlisted. And those could be applied to the community college of the Air Force so that you wound up getting credits for those things. Do you remember how all those pieces fit together? And behind that question are those strengths that military connected students bring to college?
Yeah, I definitely think so, right? Like, I think the fact that, and you know this, right? Like when you're just going through basic training and then when you go to tech school, right, you're acquiring some credit through that, right, through the CCAF. And then I don't know if they called it the same thing when I was in, but I think it's the same thing where you go back and you take your journeyman test and then you take all of the tests to sort of move up in your occupational specialty. So yeah, I mean, I think those are all great skills that military students already come equipped with, right? Because working through those things builds skills and builds the ability to do different things academically. So yeah, I do think that's.
Now, Scott, I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Everything I know about computers right now, I learned when I was an airman in the Air Force. I know technology as a result of my tech school 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. And I just finished writing a book on school safety. The basis for my knowledge about school safety is a job I had in the Air Force in disaster preparedness. So my point is there are a lot of academic strengths scholastic, scholarly strengths that we acquire in the military that we can apply to academic settings.
Oh, sure, definitely. Yeah. And I think too, like one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is this idea of range, right? Like you were asking me, David, like you're like, you've kind of done a lot of different things, right? And one of the things that I've sort of learned, at least over the course of my career now, is that doing a lot of different things is really helpful because it provides you the ability to apply different frameworks to different situations, right? And that's also a really good skill that military students have, is this idea of applying different frameworks to different situations in novel ways, because inevitably, right, like that's kind of what creates innovative thinking, right, is taking those different frameworks and applying them in different ways.
In different ways, different settings. We better move on to our next bullet, and then we might come back to some of these. Navigate with empathy. Empathy. What's your definition of empathy?
So this is going to sound really strange, but essentially, this means kind of listening without giving advice. And I know that sounds strange, but one of the things that, so when I was working at a small Christian liberal arts college, I was like the only veteran on campus. And so they were like, oh, we've got a veteran student. We need to send them to Scott so Scott can talk to them, right? My experience in the military is vastly different than what your experience was, right? And like, for instance, one of the things I like to show in my session is I have a picture, and if it's an airman trying to get through a mud pit, and there's a Marine yelling at him, and the Marine saying, "Hey, airman, what are you doing in this mud pit? You should be in a hotel room," right? And it's funny because we have like every military experience is different, right? It's different based upon what branch you were in. It's different based upon what sort of occupational specialty you were in. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I was talking to students who had combat experience, right? Who saw really tough stuff, right? That they're still dealing with. And sometimes they just need someone to listen to, right? Sometimes they just need someone to tell their story to, and they just need someone to listen and try to understand it. But oftentimes and I'm the worst at this. I want to give advice and I want to give answers, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're paid to do. We're paid as instructors to disseminate knowledge. But it's hard not to. It's easy, like in theory, but when you're in the situation, it's hard just to listen, right? To actively listen and to be there with the student who's speaking to you about whatever situation they're going through. Now, obviously, empathy extends, right, to action, right? Like if there's some sort of action that needs to take place, then sure. But like largely, I'm just talking about being someone who's actively caring about someone who's in front of you, right? And just giving them the space to talk about what it is they need to talk about.
So then navigate, then how do you pair that with empathy?
Well, I think part of that too is like getting students to like the right place, right? Kind of pushing them in the right direction, getting them the right things that they need to be successful. I'm not a counselor, right? So if I'm listening to someone and I'm hearing that they're having real issues dealing with something that looks like PTSD, I need to get them to some place that can help them, right? I need to get them to a veterans office. I need to get them some resource that can inevitably help them navigate whatever situation they're dealing with that's blocking them from being successful.
One of the things that came to mind when I looked at the title and then the bullets that you had was whether you had worked in what are those offices on campus for veterans? What are
they veterans? One stop.
What are they called? One stops. Okay. Have you worked at those and provided services to military connected students through those offices?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I've never worked directly as like a VA certification official, and I've never worked directly in VA offices.
Right.
If that's sort of the question. So
right.
I never worked directly in that capacity. In my previous job, though, I was an advisor for military students. So for them specifically, I would help them coordinate with the veterans office. But I was never specifically a veterans certifying official.
Yeah, I understand. And oh man, Scott, I can tell you stories. I've been down a lot of these different roads and we won't go there now. But yeah, I have experiences with those different offices. I use the GI Bill in different places, in different ways. but we won't go there.
Well,
I'm
gosh,
looking
you
at
know
the
as well as I
clock.
do as a
Say again?
student, right? Like that itself can be an incredibly frustrating process,
Yes,
right?
it is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I what I'm hearing you say is even if you're not in the veterans service, the one-stop office or whatever, you still need to know all of the different services that are available for students, whether they be non-military connected students or military connected students.
Definitely. And
Um,
the thing that I always press upon too is like they have to know how to get their students there, right? Like they have to, because that's the important thing, right? It's the important thing is that their student connects with those people that can help them.
right. When I teach in the Alamo colleges, I tell the students, Alamo Colleges loves you and will bend over backward to make sure you get through this program. And my point is, there are so many resources available to students, and we need to know what they all are so that we can direct students, navigate with empathy, and direct students to the places where they can get the help they need.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, one more bullet in about 4 minutes. Know your role.
I feel like I'm a professional wrestler on that one. Know your role. No, I always have this one because I always think it's important. I think faculty sometimes kind of lose sight of this, and I know I lose sight of this. But the most important relationship that faculty members are going to have at the end of the day are with actual faculty members, right? It's the people who are teaching these classes that they're going to have the important relationship with. And that's not to say that they don't have important relationships that extend across campuses, because they obviously do, right? Without student services, without those offices, students wouldn't be able to meet their learning objectives either. But like in the classroom, I mean, the faculty relationship is so important because oftentimes it can mean the difference between whether or not a veteran is going to come and decide to return for a second semester. And for me specifically, when I was a student, when I came back, I think I was 28 when I was full-time again. And I wasn't really that far removed from the people in my classes. I mean, there's only about a 5-year age difference, but it felt really removed because of the experiences that I had. And the closest connection I had oftentimes was to a faculty member. And it wouldn't even be a significantly close connection. Like when I say that, I mean, like, I would think that I was really connected with the faculty member, but I don't think the faculty member would necessarily say, hey, this was my star student and I'll remember him for the rest of my life. But there were faculty members that took the 10 to 15 minutes occasionally after class to ask me how I was doing, that would ask me if I needed any help with anything, and that were respectful when I went and told them, hey, I have an appointment with the VA. I have to go to it. I'm sorry. It were those types of interactions that seem small that go a really long way.
Now, are you saying that they should provide that kind of question to any student or military connected students?
Well, I think it's good. I think it's good practice to try to be empathetic as much as possible to all of your students and to try to give them the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. But specifically with military students, where we know that they'll have things that they need to do that are connected to entities that they really don't have much control over, like the VA, I think we can be specifically mindful about that while also working to try to make things better for all of our students.
Scott, obviously we didn't have enough time to talk about or to go into depth on a lot of these things. And of course, I have so many stories. I don't want to get us bogged down with all those different stories. But if you could boil everything down to the main takeaway you would like people to have from your and my conversation tonight, what would that be?
It would be that not all military experiences are the same for our students, and that the best thing that we can be is open and empathetic to those students so that we can help them do the best that they can do to get their degrees.
And what's the call to action you'd have for people?
My call to action would be that's a good question. My call to action would be to do a proactive job to understanding the services offered at your institutions for veterans so that you can make sure to connect your veterans to them when they need them.
And if people want to know more, how do they contact you?
So you can contact me through LinkedIn. My name's Scott D'Amico. It's kind of an abnormal one, so there's not many of us out there. You'll find me. And you can email me at sdamico2@alamo.edu.
Well, sir, I want to thank you for being our guest tonight. And I'm David Johnson from Transform Ed Consulting. And I'm wearing my Northeast Lakeview cap and my Alamo College's district shirt. So I shout out, we're proud of our association with Alamo Colleges. And thank you for being our guest tonight. And thank you all for being with us. And shout out to my friend and colleague, Cassandra Williams, who's the brains behind Educational Innovation 360 Degrees. See you next time.
Wow, that did go fast. Holy smokes.
Okay. Oh, see, we're off the air, I believe.
Okay, sorry.
Uh-oh.